Why was everyone staring at her like she didn't belong? The air in the ready room was thick gun oil, sweat, stale coffee, and tension. It clung to the walls, to the steel benches, to the men themselves, a scent of violence barely caged. SEAL Team Three's Bravo platoon filled the room with easy arrogance, their laughter sharp, their muscles coiled even when still. And in the middle of it all stood Warrant Officer Anna Sharma, the anomaly. She looked out of place but not lost. Her uniform was perfect, her posture relaxed yet economical, the kind of composure that came from years of being underestimated and surviving it. She was in her 40s, hair pulled tight into a regulation bun, face lined not by vanity but by hard experience. She held a black ruggedized tablet against her chest like a weapon disguised as glass. A few of the younger operators had already noticed her. Their glances turned to smirks. The unspoken question moved between them like static. What's she doing here? Then one of them, Petty Officer Miller, call sign Riptide, broke the silence. He leaned back against his locker, a half-assembled SCAR rifle in his hands, and said it loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hey, Chief," he called to the grizzled man at the far end of the room. "Looks like admin support found the wrong building." A low ripple of laughter. Boots scraped against concrete. Someone muttered, "Maybe she's lost." Anna didn't flinch. Her eyes moved, slow, deliberate, scanning the room like a machine mapping heat signatures. She wasn't offended. She was collecting data. Every reaction, every smirk, every careless word, it told her everything she needed to know. "Knock it off, Miller." That came from Senior Chief Evans, voice gravel and authority. He didn't raise it, but the tone made even veterans shut up. "She's with us for this op." The laughter faded, leaving a faint residue of embarrassment. But not everyone had gotten the message. Riptide's grin only widened. "You're kidding, right? What, she's running comms, logistics?" Before Evans could answer, the adjoining door opened. Lieutenant Commander Thorne entered, tall, lean, the kind of man whose presence carried its own gravity. He saw Sharma and paused just long enough for his jaw to tighten before he forced a professional smile. "Warrant Officer Sharma," he said, "glad you could make it. Find everything okay?" "Fine, sir," she replied, voice level, eyes steady. No apology, no warmth, just precision. "Good." He clapped his hands once. "All right, everyone, grab your gear, briefing in 5. As the men began to file into the adjoining room, Riptide stepped in front of her, blocking the doorway with theatrical exaggeration. He was young, hard-edged, with that restless energy of someone who hadn't been tested deeply enough. "So what's your deal?" he said, lowering his voice into a mock confidential tone. "They send you out here to count bullets for us." He gestured toward the tablet. "Or you gonna track our supply requests in real time? Be a neat trick." Anna met his eyes. Her expression didn't change. "Something like that," she said. He barked a laugh. "Knew it. A numbers jockey. Just do me a favor if we get into it, don't drop your calculator, yeah. They're hard to find in the dark." He moved aside with a smirk, but not before tapping the silver insignia on her collar, the eagle-rising symbol of a Warrant Officer 4. "W4, huh? What's that, like a super sergeant major, or my boss's boss's secretary?" The room chuckled again, but before she could speak, Evan's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "It makes her a senior technical and tactical expert in her field, Miller. Now get your ass in the brief before the commander uses it for target practice." Riptide's smirk faltered, but only for a heartbeat. He shrugged, muttering something under his breath as he stepped through the door. Anna followed, the calm center of a storm she didn't create but fully understood. Inside the briefing room, the air was colder, more controlled. The digital map on the wall showed a stretch of jagged mountains, dark terrain folded into itself like the bones of a sleeping giant. The kind of place where men vanished. Thorne stood before it, laser pointer in hand, voice confident, practiced. "Objective is simple, gentlemen. We insert via low opening halo jump at 200 LZ Vulture. Move 6 clicks overland to this ridge line. He circled a peak on the map, and in place a TACS sensor package. New Gen SIGINT node. Deploy capabilities. He went on terrain hazards, exfil timings, comms channels. Anna sat near the back, silent, listening, eyes flicking between the map and the data streaming on her tablet. When he finished, the room was still. 20 operators, each already walking the route in their minds. Then Anna spoke softly, almost politely, "Sir." Every head turned. It wasn't volume that made them freeze. It was the sheer composure behind that single syllable. "I've been running geological and atmospheric simulations on your planned route," she said, rising. Her voice was calm, academic, but carried an undertone of absolute certainty. Signal propagation models indicate that the target ridgeline sits in a deep shadow zone. The ferrite concentration in that rock will cause significant multipath interference. Your SATCOM burst transmitters will likely fail once you're more than 100 meters below the summit. A faint murmur. Riptide whispered, not softly enough, "Here we go, calculator lady's got a concern." Thorne's jaw tightened. "We've operated in these mountains for years, Warrant. Our comms guys know their business. We'll have a link." "With respect, sir," she replied evenly. "Your previous operations were in the eastern ranges. This formation is geologically distinct. My analysis shows a 92% probability of total signal loss once you descend the western face." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Her tone wasn't challenging, it was factual. But in that silence, it felt like a gauntlet thrown. Thorne's expression hardened. "And what's your brilliant solution? We bring a 50-foot antenna with us." "No, sir. Adjust the exfil. 2 clicks north to this point, null 7. She tapped her tablet, projecting a topographical overlay. "It's lower in elevation but has direct line of sight to the Reaper drone that'll be on station. You can establish a laser link and coordinate extraction from there, LZ Sparrow." Thorne stared at her, eyes narrowing. It was a sound argument, too sound, the kind that threatened pride. Her proposed route added 4 kilometers, steeper, longer, slower, riskier to a man thinking only in physical terms. "Your analysis is noted," he said, the temperature in his voice dropping several degrees. "But we're sticking to the plan. We're not adding 6 hours to this op because of a weather report from a laptop." "Understood, sir," she said and sat. The dismissal was absolute. She didn't argue, she didn't roll her eyes, she just saved the data. But Chief Evans had noticed something in her eyes, not defiance, not fear, certainty, and it unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. The room emptied. Riptide passed her on the way out, whispering, "Hey, no hard feelings, you tried." He grinned like a boy who hadn't learned that arrogance was the enemy of survival. She didn't look up. "I don't try, petty officer, I calculate." Hours later, aboard the C-17, the air felt thin, colder than the mountains waiting below. The engines roared like restrained beasts. The red light bathed their faces in demonic hues. 20 operators checked their gear, their weapons, their faith. Anna sat apart, running diagnostics on her equipment. No nerves, no tremor, just stillness. Riptide watched her from across the cabin, oxygen mask in hand. She didn't look like any soldier he'd known, too quiet, too contained. It bugged him. He couldn't decide if she was brave or detached, and that uncertainty made him itch. 10 minutes, the loadmaster shouted. The men stood, a coordinated storm of movement. Chief Evans went down the line, checking each rig, his hand steady even as the engine screamed. When he reached her, he paused. "You good, Warrant?" he asked. She looked up, met his eyes. A single nod, nothing more. He returned it, wordless understanding passing between professionals. The ramp lowered. The night beyond was vast, a silver ocean of stars over a sea of cloud. Wind howled, the light went green. "Go, go, go." They vanished one by one into the dark: Thorn, Evans, Riptide, and finally Anna. She stepped forward and fell into nothing. The fall was silence and violence at once. Air tore at her body, the world a rushing blur. The altimeter blinked against her wrist: 19000, 15000, 10,000. She pulled the cord. The chute snapped open, jerking her hard into stillness. Below her the clouds broke, revealing black ridges dusted with ice, sharp as blades. She adjusted her canopy, guiding herself toward a narrow plateau glinting faintly in moonlight. LZ Vulture. She hit the ground, rolled, came up in one motion, rifle up, breathing steady. Moments later, other canopies bloomed around her like ghostly flowers. They regrouped, silent professionals in the thin, frozen air. Not a word exchanged, but every glance said it: she made it. They began the ascent toward the objective. 6 clicks uphill, thin oxygen, no margin for error. Thorn led the way, pace brutal. Evans behind him. Anna near the rear, steady, deliberate, her breaths even as the temperature plunged. She wasn't built like them, no bulging muscle or swagger, but she moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who conserved energy the way others conserved ammo. Riptide fell back beside her at one point, panting, trying to mask fatigue with humor. Having fun yet, numbers jockey. She didn't look up from her tablet. Temperature drop is 15% steeper than forecasted. We'll have ice on the final ascent. He laughed softly. You always talk like that. She glanced sideways, calm, expression unreadable. Only when I want people to listen. And then she looked forward again, climbing into the dark. By dawn, they reached the base of the final ascent, a wall of rock and ice. The climb was slow, brutal, mechanical. The mountain accepted no mistakes. One operator slipped, dangling 30 feet before being hauled back. They moved on, breath turning to clouds. At the ridge line, the sun rose, painting the world in cold gold. The valley stretched below them, endless, unforgiving. Thorn set up the TACS sensor. Greer, the comms specialist, unfolded the SAT antenna. Bravo Actual, this is Bravo 1, radio check, over. Static. He adjusted, cursed softly, tried again. Bravo Actual, copy, over. Nothing but white noise. Thorn took the handset himself, shouting into the void. Still nothing. A long silence. Then slowly, he turned to look at Anna Sharma. She didn't gloat, didn't smile. She just met his eyes, calm, unblinking. She didn't need to say, I told you so. The mountain already had. She didn't move when the silence settled, she just stood there, framed against the cold horizon, her expression unreadable. Around her, the men of Bravo Platoon shifted uneasily. That sound, or rather, the absence of it, was louder than any gunfire. No comms. No link. No lifeline. Lieutenant Commander Thorn stared down at the handset like he could will it back to life. Run diagnostics, he snapped, voice sharp with disbelief. Greer shook his head. Already did, sir. Antenna's good, power's good. It's the rock, we're black. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Even the wind seemed to stop moving for a moment. Riptide muttered something under his breath, a curse, maybe, or a prayer. Chief Evans just looked over at Sharma, his face set but his eyes uneasy. He'd seen this before. Not the silence, the pride. The refusal to yield even when the facts screamed otherwise. Fine, Thorn said finally, jaw tight. We stick to the plan. Install the sensor. Exfil to LZ Vulture. Once we're clear of this ridge, comms will come back. He sounded confident. He had to. But confidence wasn't the same as control. Anna didn't argue. She'd already done her part, given the warning, offered the data. Now she watched them work. She could see it happening in real time, small miscalculations building into something larger, something dangerous. Her mind was always running, always measuring, terrain angles, line of sight, air density. And then something caught her eye. Far below, the sunlight shifted across the valley, flashing off a point of glass for a split second, too sharp, too deliberate. She raised her binoculars, slow and steady, adjusted focus. There again, a glint, then the faintest ripple of movement, camo. Wrong color pattern for rock. Her pulse slowed, not from fear, from calculation. She scanned the draw, quadrant by quadrant, her training a silent algorithm running behind calm eyes. Then she saw the second one. And the third. "Sir," she said quietly, "we have a problem." Thorne didn't look up from the sensor bolt he was tightening. "What is it now, Sharma?" "Suspected observation post. 6 individuals, possibly more, bearing 2902 kilometers." The words hit like a slap. Every SEAL froze. Chief Evans lifted his rifle scope, following her coordinates. "Talk me on." "See that black rock formation, the one that looks like a fist? Move left. There's a patch of dead scree just above it. They're using thermal cloaks, but one of their optics just caught the sun." Silence. Then Evans let out a low breath. "Son of a she's right, 4 minimum, heavily armed." The air changed. All the arrogance, the mockery, the laughter gone. What replaced it was pure instinct, predatory. They melted behind rocks, rifles snapping up, eyes scanning the valley. Thorne raised his binoculars, but he saw only rock and shadow. "I don't see them," he said, a hint of accusation in his voice. "They see you," Sharma replied. "They've been waiting." Her tone was calm, factual, surgical. The kind of voice you heard right before everything went to hell. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then thump. A single, distant sound echoed up the mountain. The unmistakable cough of a mortar tube. "Oh hell," Evans hissed, "incoming." The world exploded. The first round hit 20 meters away, a blast of smoke and steel and jagged rock. The concussion slammed into them like a giant's fist, knocking men off their feet. Shrapnel screamed through the air, peppering gear, ripping canvas. "Cover, move," Thorne bellowed. Another mortar landed closer. It tore through their comms gear, vaporizing it in a spray of sparks. Machine gun fire followed, the staccato rhythm of death stitching across the ridge. Riptide dropped behind a boulder, firing short bursts downrange. "Can't see them," he shouted. "They're dug in." The mountain erupted with echoes, rounds ricocheting, snapping overhead, punching chips of rock into the air. They were pinned. No comms, no air support, no escape route. Sharma pressed herself against the cold stone, mind racing. She could feel the math of the battle unfolding, trajectories, elevation angles, the rhythm of the mortar fire. Her brain wasn't just analyzing, it was mapping. She crawled over to Chief Evans, who was trying to rally the men. "Chief," she shouted over the chaos, "their primary machine gun is on the northern outcrop. They're firing at a downward 45-degree angle, the updrafts carrying their tracer arcs. That's your line of fire." Evans peered through his optics. "Angle's too steep, we can't reach it." She turned to Diaz, the team's grenadier, young, terrified, but steady. "Give me your rangefinder." He passed it without question. She calculated wind, slope, thermal lift, inputting data faster than most people could breathe. She handed it back. "See that V-shaped notch under the muzzle flash, 30 feet below, aim there. The updraft will carry the round back up. Fire on my mark." Diaz hesitated, confused. "That's short range, it'll." "Trust me." Something in her tone, not pleading, not commanding, certain. He steadied his aim. "Mark." The grenade launcher coughed once. The round arced low, vanishing behind the rocks. For a moment, nothing. Then a deep, muffled crump rolled across the ridge, followed by a secondary explosion. The heavy gun went silent. The SEALs froze. Even through the smoke and chaos, they all turned, eyes wide. Evans blinked. What the hell was that? Physics, Sharma said quietly. For the first time since the op began, Riptide looked at her not with mockery, but with something dangerously close to awe. Thorn was still down, half shielded behind his pack, shouting orders, but it was chaos, fractured, panicked. Another round landed near him, too close. The explosion lifted him, threw him sideways. When the dust settled, his leg was bent wrong. 2 men were down beside him, one screaming, one still. Evans crawled to him. "Sir, we need to move." Thorn's face was gray, lips bloodless. He looked at Sharma, eyes burning through pain and pride. "What's your plan, Warrant?" She didn't hesitate. "We can't go back to Vulture. They've got that entire route bracketed. They're funneling us into a kill zone." "Then what?" "North, Null 7. There's a volcanic tunnel system under this ridge, lava tubes from the old eruptions. Geological maps show they connect directly to the Null base." Evans blinked. "You're saying under the mountain?" "Yes, we move through, not over. They'll expect us above ground, not below." Thorn's jaw tightened. He wanted to fight it, wanted to assert control, but reality had stripped the luxury of pride away. He looked at her tablet, the map glowing faintly in the dust. He saw data, logic, hope. "Do it," he rasped. "Chief, she's got command." Evans hesitated for half a second, then nodded. "You heard the man. Move. Pack up the wounded, we're getting out." Instantly the SEALs snapped into motion. Training took over. Discipline replaced fear. Sharma led them, her calm voice cutting through the noise. 100 meters east. Behind that rockslide, there's an opening." They moved in bursts, bounding, covering, dragging the wounded. Mortars still fell, blind now, hammering empty stone. Riptide and Diaz laid down suppressive fire, short, sharp bursts. Then, at the last second, Riptide took a round high in the shoulder, spinning him backward into the dirt. "Riptide's hit," someone yelled. Evans and Sharma reached him first. She didn't pause. "Move him." They dragged him toward the rocks, bullets tearing the air above them. "There," she shouted. "Behind the slide, start digging." It looked impossible, a solid wall of collapsed stone. But she had seen it on the map, a fissure, hidden under tons of loose shale. The SEALs dug with bare hands, bleeding fingers tearing at the rocks. Then, with a low grinding sound, a boulder shifted, revealing a narrow black slit in the earth. Cold air rushed out, ancient, stale, real. "In," Chief Evans barked. "Get the wounded in first." They slipped into the darkness one by one, men who had just traded the open sky for a tomb. Riptide was pulled through last, groaning, blood slick across his sleeve. Sharma and Diaz shoved the final rock back into place, sealing the entrance. And just like that, the war outside vanished. The gunfire, the mortars, the screams. Gone. All that remained was the sound of their breathing, ragged, uneven, echoing off the wet stone. Inside it was black, absolute black. The kind that swallowed flashlights whole and made time meaningless. They sat just inside the tunnel, chests heaving. Doc Ramirez went to work on Riptide, cutting away his sleeve. "Through and through," he muttered. "Missed the bone, he's lucky." Anna knelt beside him, applying pressure with a field dressing. Her hands were steady, voice calm. "Pack it, pressure, we can't stop long." Riptide looked up at her through half-lidded eyes. His arrogance was gone, replaced by pain and something else. "Warrant," he whispered. What kind of warrant officer are you?" She didn't look up, just tightened the dressing and said quietly, "Primary specialty, signal intelligence. Secondary, regimental reconnaissance." The words hit like a thunderclap. Evans froze. The others glanced at each other, stunned. RRC, Regimental Reconnaissance Company. The DPOPS unit whispered about even among Tier 1 teams. The ones who operated beyond rescue. Riptide blinked, realization dawning slow and heavy. All the jokes, all the arrogance, aimed at someone who had probably forgotten more about combat than he'd ever learn. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, but nothing came out. Anna stood wiping blood from her gloves. "We move now," she said. "This tunnel runs northwest 3 kilometers, then branches. Stay tight, stay quiet." Her tone wasn't emotional. It wasn't even commanding. It was truth, delivered cold and clean. Evans nodded. "You heard her. Move." And in that moment, something changed, not in the mission but in the men. Command had shifted, and everyone knew it. For the first time, they weren't following Thorne's plan. They were following hers. And as they disappeared deeper into the mountain, their world collapsing to the beam of a single flashlight, not one of them doubted her again. How long had they been crawling through the dark? Minutes, hours. Down there time lost its rhythm. The world above, the cold wind, the gunfire, the mountain, had vanished behind a wall of stone. Now there was only breath, the shuffle of boots on wet rock, the scrape of metal against earth. The air was thick and stale, carrying the taste of minerals and age. Every sound mattered: a dropped magazine, a boot slipping on shale. Each echo ran down the tunnel like a shout. Sharma led the way. Her flashlight beam was narrow, controlled, cutting a silver path through the black. Beside her, Chief Evans moved in silence, rifle up, eyes scanning what little there was to see. Behind them came the rest. Diaz carrying the comms pack, Doc Ramirez half-supporting Riptide, the wounded petty officer staggering but refusing to be carried. No one spoke. The tunnel sloped downward, forcing them to crouch. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, deliberate rhythms. Each drop sounded like a heartbeat. "Hold up," Sharma whispered, raising a hand. They froze. She pulled out her tablet, the one that had survived the chaos, and tapped the screen. The light was dim, flickering. The GPS was dead this deep, but her inertial sensors were still alive. Data scrolled like falling rain. She was charting their movement by instinct and math alone. Evans leaned close. "You really trust that thing?" She didn't look at him. "I trust the math." He almost smiled. "Guess that's why we're still breathing." They moved again, slower now. Behind them, Riptide groaned. Doc Ramirez murmured something reassuring, pressing a hand to the dressing. The smell of blood mixed with the cave's damp breath. Every step forward was a battle with the mind. Claustrophobia pressed in, invisible but relentless. These men were used to the open, to sky, horizon, and distance. Down here there was no horizon, only ceiling and walls that felt too close. Riptide broke the silence first. "Feels like hell's crawlspace," he muttered, voice echoing small and hollow. "No talking," Evans said, but his voice was gentle now, not command, caution. They pressed on. Twice they came to forks where the tunnel split. Each time Sharma stopped, studied the map, felt the air, traced her gloved fingers along the rock face. Then she chose left once, right the next. She didn't hesitate. Her movements were deliberate but her face calm, detached yet deeply aware. Evans watched her sometimes, the way she listened to the mountain like it was speaking only to her. He'd served with legends, seen men do impossible things, but he'd never seen anyone like her, quiet, precise, almost surgical in the way she led. After another long stretch, the tunnel widened. They could stand fully now. The ceiling rose into shadow unseen. "Hold," Sharma whispered. She crouched, brushing her fingers across the ground. A small fissure ran across the path, barely visible. She shined her light closer. "Methane vent," she murmured. "Stay off the right side. No open flames." Dia swallowed. "Ma'am, you sure this place is stable?" "No," she said, and started walking again. No bravado, just truth. They walked for what felt like forever. Then slowly, the tunnel began to change, the walls smoother, the air colder. Finally, it opened into something vast, a natural cavern wide as a cathedral. Their flashlights barely touched the far walls. The ceiling was lost in shadow. "Set down," Sharma said softly. 5 minutes, water, check the wounded." The team collapsed, gasping, drenched in sweat. Helmets came off. Packs hit the floor. No one spoke at first. The silence of exhaustion filled the space. Doc Ramirez checked on Thorne, still semi-conscious from shock and pain. His leg was swollen, wrapped tight in a makeshift splint. Fever glistened on his forehead. Riptide sat against a rock, pale but awake. His eyes followed Sharma as she moved, calm, methodical, checking gear, scanning her map. He looked at her like a man seeing something he'd never understood before. He finally spoke, voice low. "You really one of them, RRC?" She didn't look up. "Does it matter?" "It does to me," he said quietly. She stopped then, met his eyes. There was no pride in her gaze, no satisfaction. Only the tired understanding of someone who'd carried that secret too long. "I go where the data leads," she said, "and sometimes it leads here." Evans came over, crouching beside her. "How far to the exit?" She pointed at the tablet. "1 more kilometer, maybe less, but it's the unstable section. Old magma channels. We'll need to move carefully." Evans nodded. "Copy that." He hesitated, then added, "You know you saved us up there." She shook her head. "No, the mountain saved those who listened." He wanted to say something else, something human, but before he could, a faint rumble rolled through the cavern. Dust drifted from the ceiling like ash. Everyone froze. A second rumble, louder. "Earth shift," Sharma whispered. "Move now." The team grabbed their gear in practiced panic, lights flicking wildly across the rock walls. A deep groan echoed, ancient and angry. Then the floor trembled. Chunks of stone broke loose, smashing down. Someone yelled. Sharma felt the ground tilt, her boots sliding on gravel. "Go left passage," she shouted. They ran, bent low, carrying the wounded. The cavern roared behind them, a living beast collapsing on itself. Evans turned back once, saw a section of roof cave in where they'd been sitting moments earlier. A wall of dust chased them down the tunnel, swallowing the light. They stumbled into a narrower passage, coughing, blinking through the haze. The collapse faded behind them, leaving only the sound of falling rock and their own ragged breathing. "Everyone up," Sharma ordered, voice rough but steady. "Sound off." One by one, voices answered. "All present, all alive." They stood in a cramped tunnel, shoulders brushing the stone. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Riptide laughed once, sharp, disbelieving. "We just outran a mountain." Sharma exhaled slowly. "It's not done with us yet." They pressed on. Hours bled together. The air grew colder, the ceiling lower. Sometimes they had to crawl again, dragging Thorne on a stretcher made from rifle slings and tarp. At one point, Diaz's light flickered and died. The darkness that followed was absolute, the kind that eats sound and thought. Panic started to creep in, quiet and poisonous. Evans felt it too. He could hear someone breathing too fast, on the edge of losing control. "Breathe," Sharma said softly, her voice echoing through the black. "In through the nose, out through the mouth. Follow my count." She began to speak numbers, slow, even, unhurried. Her voice filled the void like a rope thrown across an abyss. One by one, the others found the rhythm. Their breathing steadied. She didn't look back, but Evans saw what she was doing, not commanding, not comforting. Grounding. Holding the team together with nothing but tone and presence. After what felt like days, the air began to change. It smelled different, cleaner, thinner. "Stop," Sharma said. She crouched, touching the ground. A faint draft brushed against her fingers. "We're close." Hope flickered. They pushed forward, faster now. The tunnel began to angle upward, widening gradually until the walls fell away. A soft gray light appeared ahead, faint, ghostly, but real. "Contact light," Diaz whispered, disbelief in his voice. They emerged one by one from the tunnel mouth, blinking against the afternoon glare. The air hit like a blessing, cold, sharp, alive. They were standing in a ravine, hidden deep below the ridge line of Null 7. The sun hung low, painting the rocks in amber and gold. For a long moment, no one moved. The silence wasn't fear this time. It was reverence. They made it. Evans looked at Sharma. You were right again. She didn't answer. She was scanning the terrain, already calculating the climb to the top. Her mind never stopped. Rest for 10, she said, then we move. The men dropped to the ground where they stood, too exhausted to care about comfort. Riptide sat near the tunnel mouth, eyes unfocused. He still looked pale, but the bleeding had stopped. He watched her again, the way she stood alone, silhouette framed against the light. There was something almost fragile about her, and yet everything around her seemed to hold because she did. Hey, Warrant, he called softly. She turned. I was an ass back there. The jokes, he trailed off, looking away. You didn't deserve that. She studied him for a second, then said, You weren't wrong to question me, just slow to learn the answer. He smiled weakly. Guess I learn hard. Most do. She turned back toward the mountain, and for a brief moment her expression shifted, a flicker of something private. Sadness, maybe, or the weight of too many memories. Evans saw it. The way her shoulders dropped slightly when no one was looking. The way she closed her eyes for just a second longer than a blink. He didn't ask. Some burdens didn't need to be shared to be understood. 10 minutes later, Sharma gave the order. We move to the summit. Null 7, it's our extraction point. The final climb began. The slope was brutal, loose rock, thin air, fatting light. They moved slowly, helping each other, hauling Thorn and Riptide when they stumbled. By the time they reached the top, the sun had dipped below the horizon. The world glowed in blue twilight, silent and vast. Sharma dropped her pack, pulled out the collapsible laser-link array. Her fingers moved fast, assembling it, calibrating angles. The others set perimeter, weapons ready, though none of them expected another fight tonight. She aligned the device with the fatting sky, searching for the drone's position. For a long moment, nothing happened. The only sound was wind. Then a soft beep. A green light blinked on the console. Link established, she said quietly. The words hit harder than a victory shout. Relief surged through the group, a collective exhale. Evans closed his eyes. We're going home. Riptide smiled faintly, exhaustion overtaking pain. Thorn, still lying on his stretcher, managed a weak salute. But Sharma didn't react. She just stared at the blinking green light, the quiet confirmation that, for once, the data had led them out of the dark. The team began to prepare for extraction, setting flares and marking the LZ. Chief Evans stood a few paces behind her, watching as she packed her gear. You know, he said, his voice rough but warm, they'll tell this story for years. She looked up at him, expression neutral. Then tell it right. He frowned slightly. Right. Tell them pride almost killed us, she said, and that silence saved us. Evans nodded slowly. Yeah, I'll tell them that. Above them, faint at first but growing stronger, came the low rhythmic chop of rotor blades. They looked up. A helicopter, small, dark, beautiful, broke over the ridgeline, slicing through the dying light. For the first time that day, Anna Sharma let herself breathe. The mountain had tested them. And she had listened. The sound of rotor blades broke the stillness, faint at first, then building into a deep, rhythmic pulse that rolled across the mountains like thunder. Heads lifted, eyes turned upward. The Pave Hawk came in low, its searchlight cutting a white scar through the dusk. The downdraft hit them seconds before the helicopter itself, a storm of dust, grit, and bitter cold air that ripped through the plateau. Sharma squinted into the chaos, hair whipping against her face. She raised a flare, its orange light blooming like fire in the fatting blue. The bird circled once, then descended, wheels biting the rocky surface. The roar was deafening. "Go move," Chief Evans shouted. The team sprang into motion, even the wounded pushing through exhaustion. Two men carried Thorne on a stretcher, his face pale but conscious. Another pair hauled Riptide, who was barely standing. The medic, Doc Ramirez, guided them up the ramp, his hand never leaving the wounded man's shoulder. Evans went last, turning once to look back at Sharma. She was kneeling by her array, fingers flying across the controls, transmitting the last burst of encrypted data to the drone above. The mission's objective, the sensor package, the captured signals, all of it safely relayed. She shut down the unit, disassembled it with practiced precision, and packed it away. Then she stood, slinging her rifle, and walked toward the helicopter through the storm of dust. Evans waited for her at the ramp. No words, just a nod. She climbed aboard. The crew chief slapped the ramp control and the door began to rise, cutting off the outside world, the wind, the dust, the mountain, like closing the lid on a nightmare. Inside it was chaos wrapped in exhaustion. The medic moved between the wounded, checking pulses, adjusting IV drips. The rest of the team sat in silence, their faces drawn, their eyes hollow. The Pave Hawk lifted off, its engine screaming against the thin air. Through the small side window, Sharma could see the ridge line shrinking below, the jagged scar where it had all happened. No one spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, but because words couldn't fit inside what they'd just lived through. Riptide was seated across from her, pale, his arm in a fresh bandage. He stared at her for a long time, his lips twitching like he wanted to speak, then didn't. Finally, over the roar of the engines, he managed. Guess the calculator stayed intact. She turned her head, eyes unreadable, then a ghost of a smile, mostly. That was all it took. A few of the men smiled too, small, tired human smiles. The ice had finally cracked. Evans leaned forward in his seat, shouting over the noise. "Extraction ETA 20 minutes. Once we hit base, Thorne goes straight to medical." Sharma nodded. Her hands were steady on her lap, but her eyes were far away, replaying the mission frame by frame, checking for errors she couldn't afford to have made. Outside, the peaks fell away. The mountain range became a spine of black against the rising moon. 20 minutes later, the helicopter banked left, descending toward a cluster of lights in the valley, the forward operating base. It looked like nothing from above, just a few hangars and landing pads surrounded by wire and shadow. But to them, it was salvation. As the wheels touched down, the back ramp opened and the flood of movement began. Medics rushed forward, stretchers ready. The wounded were carried off first, Thorne, then Riptide. The rest followed, disembarking slowly, their limbs stiff from adrenaline crash and cold. The hangar was bright after the mountain's darkness, floodlights glaring off polished concrete. The smell of fuel and disinfectant replaced the scent of stone and blood. Evans guided his men toward the waiting medical staff, but when he turned back, Sharma was gone. He spotted her across the hangar, moving away from the chaos. No debriefing officers stopped her, no one called her name. She simply walked past the noise, past the flashing lights, until she reached a quiet, forgotten corner of the hangar, lit by a single flickering fluorescent bulb. There she dropped her pack and sat on the concrete floor. For a long time she didn't move. Then slowly, she unzipped the bag and began to clean her equipment. No music, no chatter, just the soft, deliberate rhythm of cloth against metal. She cleaned the lenses of her tablet, wiped down the laser array, checked every port and seal. Every gesture precise, almost meditative. To her, this wasn't gear, it was memory. It had kept her alive. It had kept them alive. The rest of Bravo Platoon had already scattered, showers, med bay debriefs. But one man lingered. Chief Evans. He stood near the coffee urn in the corner, filling 2 mugs with thick black liquid that steamed in the cold air. His face was drawn, eyes rimmed with fatigue. But when he looked at her, there was something else. Respect. the kind that came from having been wrong and surviving long enough to admit it. He crossed the hangar, boots echoing softly, and stopped beside her. She didn't look up, too focused on the small screws of her equipment. He waited a few seconds, then cleared his throat. She finally glanced at him. He held out a mug. Figured you'd need this. She looked at it for a moment, the steam, the chipped ceramic edge, then reached out and took it. Her gloved fingers brushed his. "Thank you," she said quietly. He didn't answer right away. He just stood there watching her, the mug still warm in his hand. "Hell of a thing, Warrant," he said finally. "What you did out there." She shook her head slightly. "We all did what we had to." He gave a faint grin. "You saved my men, that's more than had to." She looked down at her tablet. "It's my job to see the patterns others don't." "And what about the patterns people refuse to see?" That made her pause. She looked up at him, really looked, and something softened in her face, not much, but enough. "Those," she said, "usually end the same way. The data warns them. The mountain warns them. But some people only learn when the silence hits." Evans nodded slowly. "You're not wrong." He turned to leave, then hesitated. "You know, when you first walked in that room, I thought you were here to count bullets." She almost smiled. "I was, just not the kind you meant." He chuckled under his breath, then walked away, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She took a slow sip of the coffee. It was bitter, metallic, but real. Outside the hangar, dawn was beginning to bloom. The first streaks of light touched the mountain peaks, soft and pink. She set the mug down beside her gear and exhaled, the sound barely audible against the hum of generators. For the first time since the mission began, Anna Sharma allowed herself to feel the weight. The adrenaline had burned away, leaving the quiet ache of survival and the ghosts of those who hadn't made it. She thought of the men she'd led through the tunnels, their faces in the dark, their breaths syncing with hers. And she thought of Thorne, the commander who doubted her, now lying in a hospital cot because of his own pride. She didn't hate him, she understood him. People like him were necessary, bold, decisive, driven. But sometimes those qualities blurred into arrogance. Sometimes leadership meant listening, not speaking. That was the hardest lesson in the field, and the costliest. The hangar began to fill again, footsteps, voices, the whine of an engine somewhere. She ignored it all. Her focus returned to her tools, her hands steady. When Evans came back 20 minutes later, she was still there, same spot, same focus. He didn't interrupt this time. He just leaned against the wall nearby, sipping his coffee in silence. Eventually, she finished. She set her cleaned gear neatly beside her and stared at it for a long time. "Chief," she said softly. He looked over. "Do you ever wonder if we're supposed to come back from places like that?" Evans frowned, meaning. "Some people leave parts of themselves behind," she said. "I just haven't figured out which part stayed there this time." He nodded slowly. "That's the thing about the job, Warrant. You never know what the mountain takes until it's gone." Neither spoke after that. Minutes passed. Then a voice came over the hangar loudspeaker, echoing through the metal rafters. "Bravo Platoon, debrief in 15. Command wants full reports." Evans groaned softly. "Duty calls." He pushed off the wall and turned toward her. "You coming?" She shook her head. "Later, I still have data to log." He studied her for a moment, then gave a small, respectful nod. "Understood." He started to walk away, then paused at the edge of the light. "You know," he said over his shoulder, "that kid Miller, he's been asking where you are. Says he wants to talk." Sharma raised an eyebrow. "Miller?" "Yeah, Riptide." Evans smirked faintly. "Says he owes you an apology." Her gaze drifted to the floor, then to the steaming mug beside her. "He doesn't owe me anything," she said. "He already learned the lesson." Evans gave a quiet chuckle and walked off, leaving her alone again. For a long time she just sat there, the hum of the bass fading to background noise. Then slowly, she picked up the mug and took another sip. It was cold now, but it didn't matter. Because for the first time since she'd arrived at that SEAL compound, the laughter, the jokes, the dismissive eyes, she wasn't invisible anymore. Respect hadn't been asked for, it had been earned. And it hadn't come from rank or words. It had come from silence, calculation, and the courage to act when no one else could see the pattern. Outside, the mountains glowed gold under the morning sun, indifferent, eternal, patient. Anna Sharma stared at them for a long time before whispering to herself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The conference room smelled of recycled air and burnt coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, harsh and indifferent. The world outside, the wind, the mountains, the memory of fire and stone, felt a lifetime away. Anna Sharma sat at the far end of the long metal table, her posture straight, her face unreadable. Around her, the atmosphere was clinical, cold. Across the table sat 3 officers, all in pressed uniforms, their collars sharp, their eyes sharper. They weren't here to understand. They were here to evaluate. Lieutenant Commander Thorne lay in the field hospital wing just 50 meters away, his legs shattered, his pride wounded deeper still. He had given his statement an hour ago. Now it was hers they wanted to hear. The man in the center, Colonel Ramsey, Operations Group Commander, folded his hands and studied her like she was a file he wasn't sure how to classify. "Warrant Officer Sharma," he began, voice clipped. "For the record, confirm your assignment during Operation Silent Peak." She didn't hesitate. "Warrant Officer 4, attached to SEAL Team 3, Bravo Platoon, Technical Operations and Signal Intelligence Oversight." He nodded, tapping a pen on his pad. "Understood. According to your after-action summary, communication failure occurred approximately 0700 hours, at which point you assumed tactical command. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." A murmur rippled down the table. The man on Ramsey's right, a younger major, looked up from his notes. "Without direct authorization from Lieutenant Commander Thorne." She met his eyes evenly. "Authorization was granted, sir. Verbal. Commander Thorne was incapacitated by indirect fire." The major leaned back skeptical. "Convenient timing." Sharma didn't blink. "Unfortunate, not convenient." A small silence followed, the kind that tests both patience and control. Ramsey broke it. "Your report states you rerouted the team through subterranean terrain, lava tubes, to reach a secondary extraction point." "Yes, sir." He nodded slowly, flipping through the pages. "That route was not in the operational plan, nor was it approved by command." "It was the only survivable option," Sharma said. "And the decision to divert." She paused. "Mine." Ramsey studied her. "So you disregarded the mission plan, altered the exfil, and assumed command of a SEAL platoon, all without higher approval." "Yes, sir." "You realize how that reads on paper?" "I do." "And you stand by it?" Her voice didn't waver, every word. The major exhaled, his tone slipping from professional to personal. "You know, Warrant Officer, operators like Bravo don't usually need a data analyst telling them how to fight." There it was, the tone she'd heard 100 times. Dismissal disguised as authority. She didn't flinch. They didn't need a data analyst. They needed someone who could see the terrain they couldn't. Ramsey's pen stopped tapping. "Explain." Sharma reached into her case and pulled out her tablet, the same one that had survived the mountain. She powered it on, and the screen came to life with maps, graphs, and topographical overlays. "This," she said quietly, "is the operational plan for LZ Vulture." She tapped the image. "And this," she swiped, "is what I saw when I ran the geological simulation." The display shifted, overlaying signal data, terrain density, electromagnetic interference. The red bands of total signal shadow were glaring, obvious, absolute. Satellite communication failure was a mathematical certainty. The terrain made it unavoidable. The room was silent, except for the hum of the projector. Ramsey leaned closer. "You presented this to Commander Thorne." "Yes, sir," during the initial brief. "And he dismissed it." Her answer was calm, but it landed like a hammer. "He said we were not adding 6 hours to the op based on a weather report from a laptop." The younger major's mouth tightened, but he said nothing. Ramsey sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. "You're saying this entire ambush, this whole engagement was predicted?" "I warned them we'd lose comms and situational awareness once we crossed that ridge," Sharma said. "The enemy exploited exactly that window." Silence stretched. Ramsey finally sighed. "And yet you made it out, against every statistical probability." Her gaze dropped briefly to the table. "Because we stopped following pride and started following physics." The colonel's pen tapped once more, then stopped. He studied her like a man looking at a storm on a radar, one he couldn't control but couldn't ignore either. "Very well," he said finally. "Your decision saved lives. The record will reflect that." He stood, signaling the end of the interrogation. But as she began to rise, he added, "You know, warrant officer, operators don't forget when someone breaks their chain of command." She met his eyes. "Sir, they don't forget when someone saves them either." He said nothing as she left. Outside, the desert sun was brutal, a white glare against the flight line. Sharma squinted, pulling her cap low. The noise of base life swirled around her, distant rotors, shouted orders, the metallic clatter of maintenance crews. It all felt detached, like a dream she hadn't fully woken from. Chief Evans was waiting by the mess tent, 2 coffees in hand. "Colonel grill you good?" he asked, offering her one. "Only medium rare," she said, taking it. He chuckled. "He'll come around. He's the kind that measures respect in paperwork." She sipped her coffee. Paper doesn't measure anything that matters. They stood in silence for a moment, watching a medevac chopper lift off from the field hospital. Evans' eyes tracked it until it disappeared into the horizon. "That Thorne's ride to Germany," he said quietly. She nodded. "He's alive," Evans added. "That counts for something." "It does," she said softly. "So do the ones who aren't." He glanced sideways at her. "You don't let go easy, do you?" Her reply was barely audible. "Someone has to remember the variables." Evans smiled faintly. "You talk like a machine, you know that." "Machines don't regret," she said. That shut him up for a while. They started walking toward the barracks. The air smelled of dust and jet fuel, the sky an endless burn of pale blue. Soldiers moved around them, mechanics, MPs, medics, all part of the same rhythm of operations. But every now and then, someone's gaze lingered on her. Whispers followed, the quiet kind, the kind that carried weight. "Is that her?" "The warrant officer from Bravo. The one who pulled them out through a mountain." She didn't react. She'd spent years being invisible. Visibility was worse. Later that evening, she found herself in the wrecked tent, mostly empty, save for the low murmur of a TV showing news no one cared about. Riptide sat at one of the corner tables, arm in a sling, eyes red from painkillers and fatigue. When he saw her, he straightened awkwardly. "Warrant. Petty officer." He gestured to the seat across from him. "You, want to sit." She hesitated, then did. He looked down at his coffee cup, turning it in his hand. "I've been trying to figure out what to say." "Then don't force it," she said. He huffed a laugh. "That easy, huh?" "For some things, yes." He nodded slowly. "I used to think the job was about being fearless. You know, pushing harder, faster, louder than anyone else." She waited. "But up there," he stopped, his jaw tightening. "I wasn't fearless, I was blind." He looked up at her. You ever get tired of proving people wrong? Her answer came after a long silence. I don't prove them wrong, Miller. I wait until the truth does. He laughed softly, not mocking, just humbled. Guess truth hit hard this time. It usually does. He exhaled, then said, For what it's worth, I was wrong about you. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. You were wrong about a lot of things, but that's how people learn. He nodded, a slow, tired motion. I'll remember that. See that you do, she said, standing. Warrant, he called after her. She turned. When the mountain caved, you didn't even flinch, not once. Why? She studied him for a long moment before answering. Because fear doesn't change the math, she said. Then she walked away. That night the base was quiet. The desert stretched endlessly beyond the perimeter wire, its silence broken only by the occasional bark of a distant dog or the hum of a generator. Sharma sat alone outside the barracks, a small field tablet in her lap. On the screen, she replayed data from the operation, terrain overlays, comms logs, environmental readings. But what she was really replaying wasn't the mission. It was every moment of silence in between. The breath before the first mortar. The flash of realization in Thorne's eyes. Riptide's shaky apology. Data could explain a mission. It couldn't explain people. Evans appeared in the doorway behind her. You're still working. She didn't look up. I don't sleep well after numbers go wrong. He walked over, pulling up a chair beside her. For what it's worth, those numbers saved lives. She closed the tablet, finally looking at him. That's the problem with saving lives, Chief. You start counting the ones you couldn't. He nodded, staring out at the horizon. You know, I've been in this game 30 years. Seen heroes, seen fools. But I've never seen anyone turn physics into faith like you did. She gave a faint, weary smile. Faith is just data we don't have yet. Evans chuckled. Maybe, or maybe it's trust. She tilted her head, curious. He nodded toward the mountain range silhouetted against the stars. Those men, they'll follow you anywhere now. Not because of the math, because when it broke down, you didn't. She didn't answer, but her eyes softened, and that was answer enough. The two of them sat there in the desert quiet, the mountain wind whispering through the wire. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Evans said, almost to himself, sometimes the strongest sound in the world is the one you don't make. Sharma looked at him. You're learning. He grinned slowly. The night deepened. The stars burned cold above them. And for the first time since the mission began, Anna Sharma allowed herself to breathe, not as an operator, not as a warrant officer, but as a survivor. It started with a rumor. Not a loud one, the quiet kind that spreads through corridors like smoke under a door. By the time it reached Bravo Platoon, it wasn't rumor anymore. It was reality. Command had filed the report without her name. No mention of the reroute. No mention of the call that saved 6 lives. The summary read like a sanitized press release. Evacuation conducted under extreme duress. Tactical decision made at field level. That was it. Field level. No rank, no name. To the world, the mountain had been survived by chance. Chief Evans read the report twice, disbelief turning to anger. He dropped the file onto the table in the team's rec tent, the papers fluttering like wounded birds. Unbelievable, he muttered. They erased her. Riptide snatched the top sheet, eyes scanning. His jaw tightened. They're crediting the exfil route to me. I was half dead. Diaz leaned back, shaking his head. Command needs a clean story, a male face for the medal. The words hung heavy. Evans looked around at his men, tired, bruised, still limping from the mountain, but alive. All because of one woman's decisions. Anyone talk to her yet? He asked. Riptide shook his head. She's locked in the data lab, been there since 0600. Evans stood, grabbing his cap. Then we fix this before it's too late. The data lab was dimly lit, humming with the low rhythm of machines. Rows of monitors displayed streams of numbers, terrain models, satellite images. At the far end, Anna Sharma sat alone, still in fatigues, sleeves rolled up, her hair tied back. Her face was pale in the cold glow of the screens. Evans hesitated at the doorway, watching her work. The quiet intensity in her movements was both haunting and familiar. Finally, he stepped in. "You see it yet?" She didn't look up. "See what?" "The report." "I've read it." He waited and... Her hands didn't stop moving. They did what they always do. Evans frowned. "You're not even angry." She exhaled, still typing. "Anger changes nothing. Data doesn't care who's right, Chief. It only cares what's true." "That's the problem," he said, walking closer. "Truth doesn't speak for itself in this place. You have to fight for it." Now she looked at him, calm, steady, unreadable. "Fighting for truth makes it smaller. Let them take the credit. The numbers know what happened." Evans clenched his jaw. "That's not good enough." "For me, it is." He stared at her, incredulous. "You saved us. You saved him, and they're writing you out like you were a ghost." Her voice softened. "Maybe that's what I'm meant to be, the ghost that gets them home." He sat down across from her, frustrated and quiet for a while. The hum of machines filled the space between them. Finally, he said, "You ever wonder why soldiers like you don't get statues?" She didn't answer. "Because statues are built from noise," he said. "And you do everything in silence." A flicker of something, sadness maybe, passed behind her eyes. Then quietly, "Statues crack, Chief. Silence doesn't." He didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. 2 days later, Bravo Platoon assembled in the mess hall for an official commendation ceremony. A colonel stood at the podium, reading from a folder thick with euphemisms. "For outstanding bravery under hostile fire, resulting in successful extraction of all surviving personnel." Riptide stood stiff beside Evans, jaw set. The words didn't matter. They all knew what was missing. When the colonel finally called his name, Riptide hesitated. The applause started, but he didn't move. Evans nudged him, "Go on." But Riptide didn't take a step. His throat worked, his hands clenched. Then he turned toward the colonel and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "With respect, sir, I can't accept this." The room froze. The colonel blinked. "Excuse me, petty officer." Riptide's voice didn't shake. "The extraction wasn't my plan. It was Warrant Officer Sharma. Every one of us here is breathing because she made the call." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The colonel's expression hardened. "This isn't the time for—" "With all due respect, sir," Evans interrupted, stepping forward, "it's exactly the time." One by one, the others followed: Diaz, Ramirez, even the youngest operator, Miller, barely out of training. They formed a line, silent but solid. The colonel looked from face to face, realizing the tide had turned. Evans crossed his arms. "You can give the medal to whoever you want, but history's gonna remember who actually got us off that mountain." The colonel's jaw tightened. "That's enough, Chief." Evans didn't blink. "Yes, sir, it is." The colonel left the stage. The applause never started. Later that evening, the base was quiet again. Sharma sat outside her barracks, watching the horizon fade into dusk. She'd heard what happened, of course she had. But she hadn't gone to the ceremony. When Evans found her, she was sitting cross-legged on the steps, boots unlaced, eyes fixed on the red line of the setting sun. He sat beside her without a word. After a while she said, "You didn't have to do that." He shrugged. "We did. They'll write it out anyway." "Maybe, but it'll stay in us." She smiled faintly, the first real smile he'd seen since the mountain. "You're getting sentimental, Chief." "Occupational hazard." Silence again. The wind carried the faint sound of a flag flapping somewhere in the distance. "You know," she said quietly, "my father used to tell me if you ever want to see someone's character, watch what they do when no one's watching." Evans chuckled. "He raised you in the Corps." "Almost," she said, eyes soft. "He was an engineer, believed in precision, believed that numbers didn't lie, people did." He nodded. "Sounds like you." "Maybe too much." She turned to look at him. "Why'd you stay in, Chief? 30 years of this, what keeps you here?" He thought for a moment, then said, "The noise fades, the faces don't." That made her smile again, small and genuine. Inside the barracks that night, a thin envelope waited on her bunk. No name on the front, just a stamp, restricted distribution. She broke the seal and unfolded the single-page document. Reassignment orders pending. Destination undisclosed. Effective immediate. There was no commendation, no citation. Just orders. Her transfer had been approved the same day the report was filed. Evans found her the next morning as she packed her duffel. "So that's it?" he asked. She zipped the bag. "That's how it goes. They're moving you out so they can tidy up the paperwork." "I know." He watched her for a moment. "Where are they sending you?" She handed him the paper. "Undisclosed, which means I'll find out when I land." "Spook work." She gave a faint, dry smile. "Or desk work, same difference." He looked at her, something tight in his chest. "You deserve more than this." She adjusted the strap on her pack. "Deserve doesn't belong in this job." Then softer, "But thank you." He hesitated, then extended his hand. She shook it, firm, respectful, final. "You ever need Bravo again," he said, "you call, we'll show up." "I know." She turned and walked away, boots crunching on gravel, the wind tugging at her hair. Evans watched until she disappeared into the hangar. Then he turned away too, jaw set, heart heavier than he wanted to admit. Hours later, the transport plane lifted off, rising into the pale blue morning. Sharma sat near the back, duffel at her feet, the world shrinking beneath her. The base, the desert, the mountain, all fading to shapes and shadows. She leaned her head against the window, eyes half closed. The vibration of the engines was steady, almost soothing. A memory surfaced, Riptide's voice echoing in the cavern. "You ever get tired of proving people wrong?" Her lips curved faintly. "Every day," she whispered. Outside, the clouds thickened. The plane vanished into them, swallowed whole by white. And for a while, she slept, the kind of sleep that comes only after you've given everything and taken nothing in return. Back at the base, the men of Bravo stood on the ridge at sunset, facing the mountains that had nearly buried them. Riptide broke the silence first. "Think she'll come back?" Evans shook his head. "People like her don't come back, they move forward." Diaz crossed his arms. "Still feels wrong, like the mountain gets to keep her." Evans looked at the horizon, the wind brushing against his face. "Maybe that's the point. Some people aren't meant to be remembered in medals. They're meant to be remembered in silence." The others didn't answer. They just stood there, watching the light fade. Behind them, the base loudspeaker called for evening formation, but none of them moved. For a few more seconds, they stayed still, quiet, respectful, until the last of the sun disappeared behind the ridge. And in that moment, it didn't matter what command had written or who got the medal. They knew the truth. And sometimes that was enough. The rain hadn't stopped in days. Outside the compound, it fell in steady, unbroken sheets, a curtain of gray against gray, the kind of weather that made time lose its edges. Anna Sharma sat alone in the operations bay of Site Echo, a place that didn't officially exist. No insignia on the walls, no flags, just glass, steel, and the low hum of machines that never slept. The glow from her monitor painted her face in blue light. Lines of encrypted code scrolled endlessly across the screen, mission logs, surveillance feeds, signal extractions. She'd been here for 7 weeks. 7 weeks since the transfer. 7 weeks since the mountain. No one here spoke of fieldwork. They spoke in numbers, in probabilities, in clean detachment. Every operation she analyzed was 1,000 miles away, decisions made in silence, executed by ghosts she'd never meet. Sometimes she caught her reflection in the glass, the face of a woman who'd stopped looking like a soldier and started looking like a statistic. The knock on her door was soft, almost hesitant. "Come in," she said without looking up. A young analyst entered, nervous, out of place. "Ma'am, Ops Director wants you in brief too." She closed the laptop, exhaled once and stood. "Now." "Yes, ma'am," he said, "it's urgent." Briefing room 2 was windowless, brightly lit and cold. 3 people were waiting inside: the Ops Director, a thin man with an expression that could cut glass, a communications tech, and a colonel she didn't recognize. "Warrant Officer Sharma," the director began as she entered. "Please sit." She did. He tapped a folder. "You're aware of Operation Hollow Vista?" She nodded. "Remote intercepts in the Kaidan Valley, drone swarm reconnaissance." "Correct," the colonel said. "We lost visual on drone 6 at 300 hours. Thermal picked up movement, not hostiles. U.S. personnel, unauthorized." Her eyes lifted. "Whose personnel?" "That's what we're trying to find out." The director leaned forward. "We want you to trace the uplink signal, find out who broke radio silence." She frowned. "That valley's a blackout zone. Only special operations units are authorized in that sector." The colonel's tone was careful. "Then let's hope it's one of ours." She worked for 6 hours straight, her fingers moving like thought itself. Data threads, corrupted packets, partial coordinates. But when the fragments finally aligned, the signal origin flashed onto the map. Her breath caught. It wasn't some rogue unit. It wasn't an enemy intercept. It was Bravo Team's old call sign. She stared at it for a long moment, the hum of the computers fading to nothing. They were alive, operating unauthorized. And they were in the same valley that Command had officially marked as closed terrain. Something was wrong. By nightfall, she was standing outside the director's office, file in hand. He looked up from his desk as she entered. "Progress." "I found the signal." He gestured for her to continue. "It's a secure seal channel, restricted frequency. The encryption matches Bravo Platoon's legacy system." The director didn't react. That unit was disbanded after Silent Peak. "I know," she said, "which means someone's using their call sign without clearance, or they were reactivated off the record." He folded his hands. "You don't need to concern yourself with operational decisions, Warrant. Just trace the data." She didn't move. "Sir, that signal was a distress ping." That made him look up. "It lasted 3 seconds, she continued. "Manual trigger, no automation. Someone out there pressed that button knowing it would burn the transmitter." The director's voice was calm but colder now. "And you're certain of this?" "Yes, sir." He regarded her for a long moment, then said, "Thank you for your work. We'll handle the rest." She stood there, realizing the conversation was over. "Sir," she said quietly, "with respect, those are my people." He looked back down at his files. "They were your people, dismissed." She didn't sleep that night. The rain kept tapping against the window, like a pulse that wouldn't let her rest. At 200, she opened her laptop again and accessed the archive, her personal copy of the Bravo mission telemetry, the files she was never supposed to keep. The mountain, the tunnels, the sound of their voices in the dark. Every echo felt closer now. She replayed the distress ping again and again, the faint, distorted sound buried under static, but on the 4th playback she heard it. A voice, just one word. "Sharma." It was faint, broken, but real. Her hand froze over the keyboard. They weren't gone, they were calling her. By dawn, she'd made her decision. She entered the command center with quiet purpose, logged into her console, and began rerouting packet traces through her own secure channel. Every keystroke was a risk. Unauthorized queries left signatures. She was burning bridges with every command. But the pattern started forming, the path of the signal, bouncing off decoy satellites, slipping between encryption layers. The trail ended deep inside the Kaidan Valley. Coordinates 35.114, 70.821. The same ridge line they had once crossed under fire. Something heavy settled in her chest. At 800, security found her. Warrant Officer Sharma, a voice said behind her. She turned to see two MPs standing in the doorway, hands resting near their holsters. The director would like a word. Her screen still glowed with the traced coordinates. She closed the laptop calm. Of course. They escorted her to the same sterile office. The director was already waiting, expression unreadable. "You've been busy," he said. She said nothing. He slid a file across the desk. "You accessed restricted relay networks, violated chain-of-command protocol, and ran personal analytics on classified intercepts." "I was following the data," she said. "The data," he said evenly, "wasn't yours to follow." He leaned back, studying her. "You're one of the best analysts we've ever had, Warrant, but sometimes loyalty means letting go." Her voice was soft but firm, "and sometimes loyalty means not looking away." He sighed. "You're suspended, effective immediately." She didn't flinch. "Are they alive?" His silence was answer enough. She stood, eyes steady. "Then I'm not done." And she walked out. Outside, the rain had stopped. The world felt raw, newly washed. She walked across the compound, every step deliberate, past the vehicles, past the watchtowers, until she reached the comms hangar. Inside, an old drone pilot, Sergeant Mendez, was running diagnostics on a mothballed Raven system. He looked up. "Warrant, didn't expect to see you here." She smiled faintly. "You still owe me a favor from the calibration update." He raised an eyebrow. "What kind of favor?" "Flight time, no questions." He hesitated. "You in trouble again?" She met his eyes. "Not yet." He sighed, then grinned. "All right, but if anyone asks, I never saw you." By nightfall, she was airborne in a recon skiff, unmarked, silent, flying low beneath the clouds. The Kaidan Valley spread out beneath her like a scar, dark ridges, winding rivers, the ghosts of past battles. She stared down through the scope, heart steady. The same terrain that had tried to bury her once before now beckoned her back. At the base of the ridge, she saw faint heat signatures, small, flickering, almost gone. "Human." She zoomed in. 6 forms. Her voice caught. "Bravo." They were alive. Barely. She opened the comm link, static crackling in her ears. "Bravo, this is Warrant Officer Sharma. Do you copy?" "Nothing, just wind." She tried again. "Bravo, this is Sharma. If you can hear me, signal once." A long pause. Then a single blink of infrared light from the valley floor. Her throat tightened. They were still fighting, still trying. She keyed the coordinates into the skiff's nav. "Hang on," she whispered. "I'm coming." As the engines roared and the valley wind tore at the wings, Anna Sharma realized something profound, something she hadn't felt in months. For the first time since the mountain, she wasn't running from duty. She was running toward it. Back at Site Echo, alarms began to sound. Unauthorized launch detected. Rogue flight plan. Transponder disabled. The director stared at the console, jaw tight. Get her back. But it was too late. Sharma's signal vanished into the mountain storm. Inside the skiff, turbulence rocked the cabin. She gripped the controls, eyes fixed on the terrain ahead. The clouds broke for a moment, revealing the same jagged peaks she thought she'd left behind forever. Her voice was steady, but her heart pounded. "All right, Bravo," she whispered. "Let's finish what we started." She adjusted her course, descending toward the valley, toward the same silence that had once tested her and forged her into something unbreakable. And in that cold gray light, Anna Sharma, the ghost they had erased, returned to the fight. The storm came without warning. Sheets of rain slammed against the canopy, lightning splitting the sky like cracked glass. The small recon skiff bucked and swayed, fighting the wind like a wounded bird. Anna Sharma gritted her teeth, keeping one hand on the throttle, the other on the nav display. The terrain radar blinked with static interference, the mountains around her alive and hostile. "Come on," she muttered, "hold together." The Kaidan Valley yawned open beneath her, jagged ridges, flooded ravines, a wasteland of mud and shadow. Somewhere down there, 6 men were waiting. The same 6 she had once led through the dark. She switched to thermal. Faint heat signatures flickered near a collapsed ridge, barely visible, barely alive. "There you are." The skiff descended sharply, engines whining in protest. Wind tore across the hull. Alarms screamed. She ignored them all. At 200 feet, she cut the power. The skiff dropped like a stone, slamming into the ground with a jarring impact. The cockpit lights went black. For a moment, she just sat there, breathing hard, rain hammering the windshield. Then she grabbed her pack, slung her rifle, and pushed the hatch open. The cold hit her like a wall. Wind howled through the wreckage, tearing at her clothes. Mud sucked at her boots as she stepped into the storm. She turned her headlamp on. The beam cut through the rain, revealing a narrow gully ahead, the same one from her satellite scan. She moved fast, slipping on rocks, wading through freezing water. The rain masked all sound, footsteps, gunfire, even her own heartbeat. When she finally saw them, they didn't see her at first. Bravo was huddled under a broken section of rock, 4 conscious, 2 down. Their faces were gray with exhaustion, their clothes soaked and torn. Chief Evans looked up as her light found them. For a second, he didn't believe it. Then his mouth fell open. "Sharma." She stepped closer, lowering her hood. "Miss me, Chief." The silence that followed was disbelief turned into relief. Diaz laughed, a ragged, broken sound. Riptide just stared, shaking his head. "You're supposed to be in a lab," Evans said, voice hoarse. "I was," she replied. "Didn't like the view." Riptide grinned weakly. "You're out of your damn mind." "Confirmed," she said. Then her eyes went to the wounded. One of them, Ramirez, was unconscious, breathing shallow. Another lay still, his face covered by a poncho. Her chest tightened. "How long?" 2 days, Evans said. "We ran into something up north. Didn't matter what it was. We got hit, scattered, and lost comms. Same old story." She knelt beside Ramirez, checking his pulse, adjusting his tourniquet. Her hands moved quickly, calmly. Evans watched her in silence, that same quiet competence that had saved them once before. Finally, he said, "Command didn't send you." "No," she said. "Then why are you here?" She looked up. Rainwater streaked down her face, her eyes fierce and steady. "Because you called." Evans swallowed hard. "They'll court-martial you for this." "Maybe," she said, "but you'll be alive to testify." He laughed once, sharp, wet, real. "Damn Warrant, you never change. Someone has to stay consistent." By dawn, the storm had eased. The valley lay drowned in quiet, the sky a bruised gray. They moved together slowly, carrying the wounded, scavenging what gear remained. Sharma took point, guiding them through the terrain by instinct, the same pattern she'd memorized from maps long ago. At one point, Riptide stumbled, catching himself on a rock. She reached out, steadying him. He looked at her, eyes hollow but grateful. "Thought you given up on us." She shook her head. I don't give up on data sets that still have potential. He smiled faintly. You really can't stop talking like a scientist, can you? It's how I pray, she said softly. That quieted him. They climbed for hours, moving higher toward the ridge line. The wind picked up again, but now it carried a strange, clean scent, ozone and pine. Life, after all that death. Evans glanced back at her as they reached a narrow pass. Still got your calculations right. Within margin of error, she said. Margin being about the width of your head. He laughed, copy that. By mid-morning, they reached the summit, a barren plateau overlooking miles of shattered stone and mist. Sharma set down her pack and pulled out the portable comms unit, the same model she'd used on Silent Peak, the same device that had once linked them to salvation. She extended the antenna, adjusting the frequency. Come on, she whispered, work with me. Nothing, just static. Riptide slumped to the ground beside her. You think anyone's even listening? Someone always is, she murmured. Minutes dragged. Then a flicker of signal, a faint tone. She fine-tuned the dial. This is Warrant Officer on a Sharma, transmitting on emergency frequency 049. We have wounded 6 survivors. Request immediate extraction. Static. Then faintly. Copy Bravo, read you weak but clear. She exhaled, relief and disbelief tangled together. Coordinates incoming, she said. Evans stepped beside her. You did it again. She gave him a tired smile. We did it again. The extraction bird arrived 40 minutes later, a low, dark silhouette cutting through the fog. As the rotor wash slammed against them, Sharma shielded her face, watching the team load the wounded. Riptide turned before boarding. You coming with us? She hesitated. Behind her the wind howled, tearing at her coat. Ahead of her the open ramp, the path home. She shook her head. Not yet. Evans frowned. What are you talking about? I launched without authorization. They'll trace it. If I'm on that bird, it puts you all at risk. You can't stay here. I can, she said quietly, and I will. I'll find another way out. He stepped closer, angry now. You think disappearing again fixes this? You think being a ghost helps anyone? Her gaze was calm. It's the only thing I've ever been good at. For a long moment, neither spoke. The helicopter engine screamed louder, time running out. Finally, Evans said, You deserve better than exile, Warrant. She almost smiled. So do a lot of people. He reached out, gripping her shoulder. You'll always have a place with us. She nodded once, then remember what I said on the mountain. He frowned. About what? That silence saves more lives than pride ever will. He let go, stepping back onto the ramp. Take care of them, she called over the roar. He gave a small salute. Always. The ramp closed. The bird lifted, spinning dust and debris into the air. And then they were gone. The valley grew quiet again. Sharma stood alone on the ridge, watching the helicopter fade into the distance. The wind howled. The rain began to fall again, soft this time, not the violent kind but the cleansing kind. She turned, scanning the landscape one last time. The mountain loomed behind her, silent and eternal. Somewhere below, the tunnel still existed, the one she'd mapped, the one she'd survived. She smiled faintly. I guess we're even now, she whispered. She started walking. Down the slope into the fog, into the quiet. Weeks later, a classified memo circulated through command channels. Subject, Unauthorized Extraction Event, Kaidan Valley. CASUALTIES, Minimal. CREDITS, assigned to Bravo Platoon, SEAL Team 3. Notes, unconfirmed reports suggest interference by unknown operator using legacy call sign, Warrant 4. The memo was filed, buried, forgotten. But among the men of Bravo, the truth was sacred. Evans told the story in fragments, Not to reporters or officers, but to new recruits late at night when the lights were low and the air was still. He never said her name. He didn't have to. He'd just say, "Once when the mountain tried to bury us, someone found the way out. She wasn't loud, she wasn't proud, she just did what had to be done." And every time he finished the story, he'd pause, like listening for something that wasn't there anymore. Maybe the whisper of wind over stone. Maybe the sound of a voice counting in the dark. Months passed. Then one evening, under a blood-orange sky, a message arrived in Evan's inbox. Untraceable, encrypted. Just a single line of text. New data set confirmed, all variables stable, tell them silence still works. He stared at the screen for a long time, smiling. "Welcome back, Warrant," he said quietly. Far away, somewhere beyond maps and orders, Anna Sharma closed her terminal and looked out across the sea. Waves crashed against the rocks below, endless and patient. She pulled her hood up, the wind tugging at her hair, and breathed deeply the smell of salt, the sound of infinity. For the first time in a long time, she felt peace. Not the kind you win. The kind you earn. Her reflection flickered in the darkened glass beside her, tired eyes, scarred face, unbroken spirit. She thought of the mountain, of the men she'd saved, of the silence that had always been her ally. And with a faint smile she whispered to herself, words only the wind could hear. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.